So how are you doing? Thank you for your time
I'm,
joining us on this webinar.
it's a pleasure. And actually, talk about it. I'm actually in quarantine.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I was in the UK. I was taking my son to university. I came back, and here
Mhm.
we have to do 14 days quarantine.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm in my own area. I'm on my 10th day. So it's very important. I agree to all of us to manage this COVID.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Julian, these are difficult times. I mean,
Yeah.
nobody knows for sure what is the right method to deal with this. So we are all, it's a trial and error. We are all experimenting. All we can do is be safe and try to keep each and every one of us in our vicinity also safe. So, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to Julian Gordon, the Vice President of Asia Pacific at Hyperledger. And Julian has a wonderful session for you. And since he is concentrating on Asia Pacific, I'm sure his knowledge and insights would be very beneficial for you. If you have any questions, please raise them on the chat and I will bring you on stage. Julian, I hand over the stage to you.
Yeah. Can you see my presentation?
If you can just open it. Yeah.
Okay. Can you see it now? Can you see or not? Hello?
You just did it again. Can you just open it up once more? It was perfect when you did it.
Okay. So can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I think we all can hear you. If you can just press share screen.
All right. Okay. I'm going to take about 20 minutes. I've got to time that, right? I'm going to 20 to
Perfect.
25 minutes. I'll go through a quick overview of Hyperledger, who we are, what we do, and then I can talk maybe a few use cases and maybe go into happy to talk. As you said, I've been working. Actually, I worked in Asia. I was born in Hong Kong. I'm from Asia Pacific, born in Hong Kong, brought up in the UK, and I've been back here 25 years. I've been to Jakarta many times and done much work there. So I wish I was with you, but I'll just quickly go through this. So I thought I'd start with a quick quote here from Deloitte. You know, I think when we started with Hyperledger 5 years ago, it was very much a kind of early stage. But now I think we're coming to the point where I have our members and their customers who are not asking about how blockchain works. It's more about we want blockchain, and blockchain is now hasn't become boring yet, but when it becomes boring and it's really part of a trusted, cloud provision or some kind of service, we know that we're there. So in my area of blockchain, we are very much as not just an innovation, but really very much now in place and working with a number of different companies. So this is just saying leaders no longer consider technology groundbreaking and merely promising. They're now seen as integral to organizational innovation. So what I may do actually, just I think because I heard from that person, someone saying that they're early on in blockchain. Maybe I'll give a little bit of context to where we stand in Hyperledger. Hyperledger, we're very much in blockchain as business, a business blockchain. So if you think about blockchain, it started 2008 with Satoshi, and he or she or whoever that person or individual was or group, they took a lot of different technologies that go back actually to the 90s. But I think the genius of Satoshi was pulling that together and creating this, the global currency as we know it today as Bitcoin. And then a couple of years later, we then had Ethereum. And that came up really with the concept of a one world computer and the concept of Ethereum. And actually the real breakthrough for me in many ways was the smart contract, the capability of putting business logic on top of this immutable chain, this one view, this of one source of truth amongst many different organizations. So we Hyperledger came about, it was about 5 years ago. So that was a couple of years after Ethereum. And we were more focused on business blockchain. So more on the permission side, even though we now do have permissionless, we're more on permissioned. And if you understand permission, that means that everyone in the chain is known. They go through some kind of certificate of authority or some kind of KYC to bring you into the chain. rather than permissionless, where any player can join, which has its own market. And I believe actually there will be a spectrum of permissioned to permissionless chains around the world. So that gives you a little bit of background. So what is Hyperledger? So Hyperledger is an open source, we're a non-profit, we're a collaborative effort to bring and develop cross-industry blockchain technologies. What we do is we create software, and we create software with an open source community. We are hosted by the Linux Foundation, and that's important. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the Linux Foundation is. And then we're a global collaboration. We have many members, thousands of people around the world using our technology, and lots of people developing our technology. And we're not just in finance, we're across industry. I talk a little about the Linux Foundation. It's because really what underpins what we do, and really I think a lot behind why we've been successful. The Linux Foundation was developed really to manage Linux, and which I don't know how many of you know what Linux is. If you're an IT person or technology background, you probably do. It's the largest, most successful ever software project. Between 60 and 90% of the world compute runs on it. But it was developed, the key thing about it was developed in an open source way. No particular organization develops it. I actually work for Sun, I work for HP, I work for these large technology companies. We had our own proprietary software. But Linux ultimately, which was developed by Linus Torvalds from Finland, he put it out there, and it's developed into now the largest, as I said, the largest operating system in the world. A few years ago, they looked at not just looking at operating systems, they look at all different technologies, and they're now the leader in cloud and many different, the plumbing of the world. A lot of that is basically a Linux Foundation project. And by the way, we're non-profit, as I said again. So that's the Linux Foundation. So, and that's key to how we came about. We came about 5 years ago, nearly 5 years ago. It's actually 5 years ago in December. A number of our members, about 30 people like JP Morgan, Intel, IBM, and a lot of startups as well, came together and said, we don't want to develop this permissioned business technology just ourselves, and we want to develop as a community. And out of that came Hyperledger. And I think it's key to this is that if you're using Hyperledger technology, you can use it for free. There is no gotcha. It is something that you can contribute to, but you can also use. You can take it and do what you want with it. You can use the cloud providers and others who've taken that technology and put other bells and whistles, but it is a completely 100%, and we welcome everyone. And diversity is very important to what we do as well. And we're led by technical contributors. So we have a technical steering committee, which is actually made up of people who are voted in by the contributors, the people actually who write the code and design the code. So completely open. We have, if you look in the 4 years, and nearly 5 years now, we have, and I'm just going to show you a little bit about technology. We have about 15, actually 16 different technologies. So we're really a community of communities, many different technologies. And many of those are production release, which means they're recognized as being something that can be used at enterprise grade. 4 of them at one, actually, Fabric, which I'm going to talk a little bit about, probably the most famous of our code bases, is at 2. We're global. We've got lots of community groups. We have meetups around the world. We have all kinds of ways of which you can get involved in our community. So I think in our space and that we are, in terms of, I know we saw the company before, which is talking about the Avengers. I love the name, by the way. We are in a different world, even though actually I think some of our technologies can be used in developing DeFi. But we're predominantly in the business permissioned world, and this is a survey. There is very little data out there who's leading that. So this is an example of a company called Forbes. Forbes magazine every year put out a survey, and this survey is of top companies who are over $1 billion revenue who are using blockchain, and over 50% of those, by far the largest, is Hyperledger. And I just take some examples. China Construction Bank, who have one of the largest trade finance networks in the world. They've been running it for 2 years. or nearly 3 years now, running using extended letter of credit. They've done $50 billion worth of extended letters of credit in China with a bank consortium. Cargill are working in supply chain. HSBC have done a myriad of different things. Walmart, I'll talk a little bit about them. We have time, but that's probably one of the most famous use cases. Honeywell is around aeroplane parts, supply chain. Daimler, I think, are doing a number of things, and Nestle are also doing stuff. So there is a plethora of production implementations today using Hyperledger, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. This is the technology. So in the end, what does Hyperledger do? We rewrite code, and that code is developed by the community, by developers who predominantly work for companies or individuals, and they're all what we call in our greenhouse. They're all under the same governance framework, the same legal framework, and they use the same license, which is a very important thing in open source. I'm not going to go into that today, but happy to talk to people about that another time. But these are all the different projects. The most famous one, and the first one, was Fabric, Hyperledger Fabric, which was contributed initially by IBM and Digital Assets, but now has many companies contributing towards it. And actually, one of the successes of open source is not just one company developing the software. It really should be multi-company, as diverse as possible. And that's been a secret sauce, actually, of Linux Foundation projects, is that diversity. Sawtooth is another project, another DLT blockchain, which has done a lot of supply chain stuff. And actually here, this Hyperledger Grid that was contributed by Cargill. We have Aroa, which is more kind of for mobiles, actually in the Bank of Cambodia. They have developed, it's kind of like a CDBC, a central bank digital country. It's just not quite exactly that, but they're using that, and that's a great use case of digital money being used in a place. Actually, in the end, the greatest push for digital money really is a place where you have the unbanked. So this is helping the unbanked use. And then we have, so these are all permissioned blockchains. This is Indy, which is also another area which I'm not going to go into depth today, but around digital identity and around self-sovereign identity, the ability for you to own your own identity. And we have many great examples of that being used, both by governments and by individual organizations. So, and something particularly called the sovereign institution. And then we have these last two here, Besu and Burrow. These are both Ethereum projects. Burrow is an Ethereum virtual machine, which you can write Solidity contracts on. That was contributed. It also sits on top of Fabric and on top of Sawtooth. These are all modular, and many parts of these are used by other parts. And in fact, many developers will take all this technology and put it together and develop those Hyperledger or blockchain networks. And Besu is very interesting. That came in last June. That was contributed by Consensus. And I think if you know Consensus, that's Joe Lubin, who runs the company, which was one of the original, along with Vitalik, as one of the original founders of Ethereum. And they have contributed, because Ethereum also has an enterprise version rather than just the standard mainnet type version, and comes under the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance specification. And that's what, and Besu is the version they had called Pegasus, which has now been contributed. So we have Ethereum, so we have a Java-based client, so we can connect to the mainnet and to the classic net. We have a bunch of different technologies, and these I won't go into today. But we have a wallet here for identity. Avalon is all about off-chain, speeding up the process. Cactus is around interoperability. So how do these different chains work? So we're creating a chain maybe for a banking chain, and then you've got a supply chain. So how do if those need to interconnect, how does that work? So that's what interoperability is working on, and a bunch of different things also in our labs. So for the technologists, there's a lot more behind that, which I could take you through. Just to give you the fact that, in these 5 years, we've gone from being a nascent project to being in every single cloud provider globally, pretty well provides a version of Hyperledger Fabric, which comes from the original version, which is you can all have access to, and they put their own services around this. And there's interesting things like actually the BSN, which is the China network. We've got people like Huawei and Ant Financial, and also the Googles and the Oracles, SAP, IBM, they all using Hyperledger Fabric for their customers and their businesses. And the great thing about this, and as we see with this technology, because originally blockchain is a complex technology, right? But then we're slowly getting with cloud providers and the technology, it's slowly getting simpler and simpler as we abstract out and provide tools for people to use this in a throat out 4 nodes, put together a network. The easier we can do that, the more people can access that. So that's one of the things that we're always trying to do, and our members are always trying to do that to make it easier to use and obviously more cost effective, and therefore more easy, a wider audience, and therefore more effect. Okay, we've also we've been working with our members and others, and we now have what we call Hyperledger certified service providers. These are companies who have people who have taken certain exams, the administrative exam, and we have about 20 of these. We just started that with Accenture, SAP, and actually you notice lots of companies in China. I'm talking about Asia Pacific. We have a lot of great use cases in China. China has taken a very forward-thinking, from the very top, very forward-thinking view on blockchain, permission blockchain. So we have a lot of activity there, as well as ASEAN, India, and all those other places. We also have training and certification. And by the way, Emergo, who you just saw, who Maraki-san discussed, they're one of our training partners, so they can help you with training. We also do have free training. You can go to our EDX courses. We have lots and lots of free training out there. And we work with lots of the top universities. We work with the MITs, all the global companies, and Peking University, all the universities we work with as well, and a lot of these are university courses. So a lot of activity, and as I said, at Emergo, who talked before, are a Hyperledger training partner. And we very much believe that ultimately education has to underpin technology. It's all of us talking about technology. If you do not have the technologists who are trained, you won't be able to realize this technology. And actually, blockchain is not just about the technology. There's this thing called BOLT. You've got to have business, you've got to have operations, you've got to have legal, and you've got to have technology. So actually building a blockchain network is not just about the technology. You also should have those other skills as well. And obviously a lot of those can be provided by many different organizations. I'm not going to go into this very much, but I told there's lots of students and others, and you can contribute. If you want to contribute and get involved, if you can code, you can go to our wiki. If you want to write and translate, actually, interestingly, we have translated in many different languages, but we don't have a Bahasa Indonesia. Maybe we should have someone help contribute and translate some of the work we have there. And you can participate in meetings. We have lots and lots of meetings around, and here are the kind of meetings that you can attend to. Anybody, all our stuff is open. Our technical steering committee, who are those 11 elected people who manage the overview of the project, you can go and see them. We have architecture, identity, performance. We have a technical working group of China. We also have a India chapter. I'm looking to create an ASEAN chapter, so if people want to get involved in ASEAN, I would love to bring the ASEAN community together. I think there's very much we have lots of meetups that create that because there's so much happening in ASEAN, especially around, I would say, trade finance, other areas. And then we have, importantly, a diversity, civility, and inclusion working group. And then we have a bunch of interested groups, and these are all free. Anybody can attend, right? Healthcare, telecom, supply chain. Trade finance is one that I'm particularly interested in. Happens every Tuesday at 3:30 p.m. You can go to our wiki, have a look, and anybody can attend. Actually, we've got a very interesting talk next week. Every 2 weeks, we have the ICC looking at standardization of trade globally and how we can take, how we can create a platform. Trade is complex. So a lot of these things about cross-border trading, it's all very well point solution, but how can we do this outside the point solution? Are we going to have a world of different platforms that connect, or are they going to have different standards? China, Europe, it's a lot of interesting subjects, and then even we're just talking down to the nitty-gritties of trade finance. So many different interesting areas that you can join in terms of special interest groups. I talked about translation, and by the way, do not. Some people are a little bit shy, but feel to go and look at our staff. Don't wait for an invitation. Just get involved. Go to our wiki, and everyone is welcome, right? So please do that. This is our wiki.hyperledger.org. If you click out one thing, wiki.hyperledger.org, and you can have a look and see what we're doing. So I'm going to talk a little bit in the next 5 minutes. I think I've nearly taken up a good chunk of my time around some use cases. These are just some of them. I talked about China Construction Bank. British Columbia is around identity, self-sovereign identity. I mentioned that a little bit, and I will just quickly go through one of the most famous ones ever is Walmart, which is now part of the food network within IBM. But they were able, and this is this started in two places in the US and in China. In China, it was all about distributing pork and tracking and tracing of pork. And in the US, it was around a mango. And the famous quote it used to take in the US, if you wanted to go into Walmart and the storekeeper took a mango from the shelf and said, "Where did this come?" It would take them 7 days to find out. They'd have to bring up the supplier, who'd bring up the supplier. But once they put the blockchain in place, it could be done in 2.2 seconds. Now, why is that interesting? All right, that's great. We now know where that mango is. How useful is that, right? In certain markets, that is very useful in terms of provenance. So, as I think was mentioned by Margo Mataka-san, was that the coffee, about provenance of coffee. So, if you make the best coffee in the world, you should be able to prove that. So, to stop people creating fakes. So there's a whole area around provenance. Make sure that you're fishing, that if you're doing fishing, that fishing's coming from sustainable sources. There's a whole area around even just provenance. We have provenance in other areas. Provenance of, I think I saw someone talking about reusables, but in terms of carbon credits, how do you know that carbon credit that said there were 20 acres of windmills in Indonesia? How do we know that there really are those behind that? How do we know the provenance behind that? So a lot of stuff around provenance. This is now in production, but really around greens. And the thing in the US is there have been lots of we're all used to diseases now, right? Unfortunately, but you'd have salmonella or some kind of outbreak, and that would be maybe in some kind of greens, maybe in spinach. They would then have to remove everything from the shelf. But now they can do targeted things with their supply chain. They can say, we know where it came from. We just remove that part, which helps them and helps in terms of consumer confidence. This is another one, a supply chain. This is around a product called Tantalium, which is in your mobile phone. Everyone has it in their mobile phone. You have it in your car. It's part of what makes batteries. But the problem is around provenance. There is good Tantalium that is mined in an ethical fashion, and then there is bad Tantalium that comes from places where these things aren't, where they have child labor and other challenges. And that is predominantly in the Congo, right? And Rwanda, being very close, is where they have controls. So, and the steps that it takes in terms of Tantalium from mine to the consumer is going through Rwanda, mined in Rwanda, refined in Macedonia, manufactured in the US, shipping from the US, assembly in China, and then distributed to the consumer. You can consider the number of places that people can slip in, tainted Tantalium. So this is something with a company called Circle came out of the UK actually, and they're working with with the Rwanda government and mining companies, and they have put provenance in there in terms of facial recognition and signing of documents, all put on a supply chain. So, and they hope this should be part of what companies will be able to say. An iPhone or an Apple or an Android provider would say, I now can say to you, consumer, this This is ethically based materials that we're buying from you. We're not living off child labor, etc., etc. So I think that's a great use case. And there's in diamonds, Everledger. There's another example that's been going for now. That's been going for 3 years as well. And they've got over 2 million diamonds, which they track. This is one close by. This is around trade finance. This is a company called DOT Ledgers, who actually just announced today they've just done a deal with, I think, the top 12 banks around some other documentary credit activities in blockchain. They provide a platform for buyers and sellers. Particularly, a lot of it's around agricultural produce, and they provide a platform where people can share all the documents associated with a trade. And then the bank, in this case it's DBS, has access to that and can provide better credit. The more information you can provide, the better provenance that information is, the better the credit rate that you can get off your bank. So this is just example. We have Everledger as well. We trade out of Europe. We have I can give you a long list of large trade formats run by large banks and smaller organizations around the world. And this is just taking off and actually COVID and it's really helping. Not that COVID is a positive thing, but COVID is real demonstration for that we should digitize. Digitizing means we don't need the wet signature, that we're not reliant on individuals doing certain things, and we can increase trade. So digitization of trade is something that we see, in the end. Originally in trade, you had trade, by writing. Then we had, at the beginning of the century, we had a lot. From my career, right from the 80s onwards, we digitized transactions. But now with blockchain, we really can trade this trusted world post-internet, and I think that is very exciting. And this one, I'll just end with this one, because I think I've now come up to time for quick questions. This is a very interesting one. This is in China. This is around internet courts in China. Believe it or not, you can do your court work, your claims through the internet. You put your claims up, you put all your documents that you need to collect, you put them up on the internet, and to the court, they're presented to the court, they're used by the different lawyers, and then they're presented, and the case is done. What they do here is very simple. When you set up the documents, they hash them, they put them on the blockchain, which is a permission blockchain, but you can see it externally, and they have over 70 million hashes on that already. I'm now going to rather continue. I think I'm going to hand back so we have a little bit of time for questions.
Yes, Julian, thank you so much for the presentation. We have loads of questions, but I think we can take about 2 or 3 of them. I have a delegate from Austria, actually. Mario is from the Graz Institute of Technology. Let me see if I can call him on the stage. He has a question for you. Mario, are you there? Well, I'll just say, okay, he is on stage. Mario, can we hear you?
Is it possible to hear me now?
It is. We can hear you, Mario. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Yeah, your video is switched off, I guess.
Hello, is it possible to hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you and we can see you.
Okay, Okay, can you hear the sound meanwhile?
Yes, it's perfect.
Perfect. I'm very happy. So thank you very much for the very interesting talk. I'm working, as already mentioned, at the Graz University of Technology, and we have meanwhile implemented Hyperledger Fabric in one of our processes.
Okay.
I find it to be extraordinary interesting technology, but what I still think it's suffering from a bit is a widely available source of information on how to get started. I have myself tried to use some of the course materials which you mentioned before, but I just come very often to the conclusion that due to the speed of the code changes, blockchain seems to be one of the most of the fastest developing technologies in the world. It's pretty difficult to work with a state of the art. And it would be amazing if on GitHub or something to see a real world example. For instance, the Walmart example or the Tantalium project. I've read about both of them. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It would be great to see how this was implemented in real life and to actually see the code. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, yes. So it's a very good. Sometimes you're a victim of your own success, right? As we grow so fast. So Emergo, as we mentioned, we have many training partners who can help you. We have a lot of stuff in our GitHub in our wiki. A lot of good material around Hyperledger Fabric. I think that's what you're using, right? I think what you're looking at is the challenges that we've got 2.0. So yeah, there's lots of material out there. So I think if you're an academic institution, we do have an academic program. I can connect you to that, right? I can help you talk to others. What we really want to do is create a community who can solve a lot of these problems, right? We're actually a small organization. We're not a private, we're a non-profit. So I'll be very happy to connect you to others and see whether we can find what you want and what you need, right? Or maybe you need to work with others to create that. We'd be happy to do that. But yeah, it's a continual challenge education, keeping people, we try to do as much as we can, free education. And we also have Emergo who provide other education, other partners. But yes, absolutely. The more we can do, the better. And happy to help. I'll put my anyone can contact me. I'm always contactable, right?
Julian, we have a next question from Jonas Sunandar from Indonesia. His question is, do you have renewable energy use cases where Hyperledger is the best platform to build on for it?
So I'm not neutral enough to say whether it's the best or not, but I suspect it is. So yes, so we have lots of renewable. In fact, we have a climate special interest group. So I would advise you to join that special interest group, the climate special interest group, which I think has a lot of materials. You can go to our SIG, our wiki. I'm happy to give you that information, or maybe I'll give it to you, Sarfraz, and you can share it with all the.
Sure.
Share it with all.
We will share that with everybody after the event.
We have a bunch of links, or actually on my presentation today, you can go on those links, right? As one of the special interest groups, we do have some stuff around, and we have lots of renewables. And when you talk about renewables, there's many different components within that, from this, the way that we're going to work with carbon credits to tracking of plastic, and there's a great plastic examples of tracking plastic. Many different examples of where we're trying to solve that other great issue, right, that we have out there, which is climate change and that trying to create that circular economy.
Do send me your sanitized version of your PPT so I can share it with all the participants so they can use it for the learning purpose. One last quick question from Fuadian Sia. Any of that enterprises using Hyperledger Fabric willing to use permissionless blockchain, for example, Ethereum or Cardano, etc.?
That's the question you have for me?
Yeah, that's a question for you. Any of them?
No, absolutely. We have permissionless. So we have Ethereum technology, right? We're about technology, right? So how you implement it in the real world is up to the community and the ecosystem. But so I think there's going to be the spectrum. So with this technology, as the previous question said, it's moving at a remarkable pace. But I think there's going to be a permission world, and there are different worlds where you may want it permissionless, right? I think permission is easier to get to because of the regulatory and other and just in terms of performance. And I think that's going to be a big, strong component of what is going to be out there in production and being used. But permissionless. And how people use up, tokens and other things is another subject altogether, right? But yes, I think there will be a world, and it's from a technology perspective, it's incredibly interesting. From a business perspective, we'll see. But I know that permissioned is definitely happening, and we do see permissionless. And Ethereum has EEA. If you go to the Ethereum Alliance, right? Which is it's really not just Ethereum. They're creating standards. We're not a standards body. We develop code, a standards body, and they have an Ethereum, enterprise Ethereum, which talks about different ways that you can keep privacy within a public or permissionless blockchain. Because there's a world where you don't want to share everything. You don't want to share pricing. There's certain things you do not want to share, but it's also good to have as much of an open market as possible, right? So I think depending on industry, time and place, I think different models will evolve. But the jury's out.
Perfect. So I hope Pudyansa and Jonas, your questions have been answered. Julian, thank you once again for being with us today. And do share your presentation, and I will share it with all the participants. Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.